Welcome to Activate Yourself with Geeta Sidhu-Robb, where we feature otherwise normal people who, because of events in their life, have turned left and done unusual, inspiring, incredible things. Like build a business, become a happiness expert, marry a prince, create an empire, or like your host, set up a health and wellness business, Nosh Detox. Here's your host, Geeta Sidhu-Robb.
Hi, my name's Geeta Sidhu-Robb, and this is Activate Yourself. So today we have the absolute personification of activating yourself as a guest. The chick woke up and chose not violence, but incarnation, damn it. Our guest today decided what she wanted to have, decided it was going to come no matter what, then thought, sod it, I'm going to make it happen. And what I really like about today's guest is that I am rarely in a place where I look at someone and I think, God, when I grow up, I want to learn how to navigate life like you do. And today's guest is 1000% that person. When I grow up, if I have this much chutzpah in my life, this many balls, I will have been doing really well. So I want you to listen to this episode today as a way of thinking, wow, could I do that? Because I'm sure someone said no to you. When they said no to Preethi, they really regretted it because she thought, sod off, I'll do it myself. And so let's welcome Preethi Nair. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on and for telling us your story. Because really we met because I was listening to you speak at an event. And it was very unexpected to have you there. And I was like, oh my God, we need to have this woman on the show. And then before you came on now, I was like, I swear we've had you on because I now know your story so well because I've met it so many times. I feel like you've been a guest, and happily you have not yet been a guest. So it's an absolute pleasure. So you started when you, I mean, this version, that because we haven't got long enough to talk about your whole life, but this is when you wrote your first book, Gypsy Masala, and nobody would publish it for you.
Yeah. So the story starts there. So I was rejected by every single publisher, and I had just got made redundant. And I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. So I put on a suit and I pretended to go to work. And at that point, I had just a stack of rejected manuscripts. And I thought, what am I going to do? And it took a process because I'm very ashamed to say that that suit routine did last about 8 months. But at the end of the 8 months, I had a vision.
Where did you go?
I went to the London City Business Library, so it was just round the corner from work. So I felt good in the sense that I felt like I was going to work, just a few doors down. So I mean, before manifesting was a thing, right? Because I'm of a certain age now and manifesting is all the rage now. But back then I just took out a sheet of paper and I didn't forget the fact that I was redundant and jobless and pretending to go to work. But I thought, write the story of where you want to go. So I took out this piece of paper and I wrote, I'm a best-selling novelist. My books are translated internationally. I've got film rights sold. And then it was a process of, right, how am I going to get there? And how do you simplify getting there? And so then I just came up with a vision. And in 2 simple sentences, it was, I'm going to self-publish this book, make it incredibly popular, and then sell it to big publishers. And that was the vision.
Okay, so then I like the steps, You tell me how that worked.
Oh, so the steps very early on, I realized that public relations and PR was a massive part of getting any product out. And I had spent my whole budget, pretty much my whole life savings, because I was saving up to buy a flat, and put it all into self-publishing. And I had very little money left for PR. And back then I was incredibly shy and introverted. And I thought, the process of calling up journalists saying, hi, I'm Preethi Nair, I've got a fantastic novel, and it's by Preethi Nair, would sound absolutely ridiculous and with no credibility. So I took out another sheet of paper in the library and I did a character study, a sketch of my ideal publicist. And on this list, she was fearless, she was feisty, she was everything that I was not. And in my imagination, she was blonde because it was just
yeah, for sure. Oh no, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Distance from myself. And I just thought blonde girls seem to have all the fun.
But I mean, So you really, just a little break into that. When I first hired my first PR for Nosh Detox, I was so clear what I wanted. And I remember going to everyone and saying, I need somebody English, white, and blonde, who's called Friggin' Tiffany or something. And I ended up with the best PR in the world called Becky, who laughed like crazy when I told the story. But Becky was my PR and the best PR I've ever had for about 10 years.
Yeah, so Prue was my PR, but she was my alter ego self. Everything that I wasn't, feisty, fearless of rejection, just wouldn't take no for an answer, could pick up that phone 99% of the time with a no and keep going and not be bothered by that no. And it was weird because it was me, but it was just a very distant version of me, like an alter ego version of me, a much better, powerful version of me. So I did this PR thing, like just trying to promote Gypsy Masala for it's probably about a year. And as you know, in PR, but even before you have your product placement, you've got to create all the buzz, the interviews, the radio, the television, etc. So I did this for months and months and months, just collecting all the PR I could a week before my launch. And what happened was, I mean, when you're running two businesses, as you well know, and you've got a pretend alter ego and you're putting on a suit and pretend to go to work, just a multitude of things can go wrong. And the first thing that went wrong was
pieces there.
Yeah. I mean, but the first thing that went totally wrong was when you self-publish, it's down to you to check your proofs, to check your book copies, to check. And because obviously I had invested everything that I had in it, I checked them about 10 times. And so they went off to the printer to be printed. And my mum and dad I thought it was like a bit bizarre to come home with a whole stack of books. So I told my mum and dad by the way, mum and dad, been published by a big publisher. And my dad said, you still have your job, don't you? Which kind of left me no room to say, no, I've given myself a book deal. So I lied and I felt really bad in lying, but I thought, well, the end will justify the means and it will be fine and it will all work out.
Let me stop you a sec. So actually what you're saying is Prue actually got you a publishing contract in a big publishing house.
Yeah, well, it was myself who had given...
I have a published.
Yeah. It was myself who'd given myself the publishing deal, but I told my parents that I was given a publishing deal. So then I was driving up to Northampton to collect the books. And my dad, this is when my dad said, you still have your job. And I said, yes. And I was driving up and though I felt deceitful, I felt so happy because it just felt I was following a dream and it was what I was meant to be doing. And I came back to London. And why Northampton? Because it's going to sound so ridiculous, but I used to think big. And I used to think, when I'm just selling thousands of copies and thousands, no one can trace this PO box address to Northampton because I've got no connection to Northampton whatsoever.
No one will know the story.
No one will know the story. Anyway, because I was collecting the books from Northampton and I couldn't seem to get into my parents' driveway. I was thinking, what? This is really odd. Why is this? Anyway, took a stack of my books, walked in, and unbeknownst to me, my parents, because they were so proud of the book deal that I'd given myself, decided to invite all our friends and family to celebrate. And that was the first point where I thought, oh my God, I mean, talk about imposter syndrome. Like the original.
Parents for celebrating you like
imposter. That. And I thought, oh my, I mean, that was even worse, them celebrating me. But then
terrible, but still, how lovely of your parents.
Yeah, but what was even worse was it was a book deal that wasn't really true. It was the one that I'd given myself. Anyway, in the midst of all of this, I heard this little voice inside of my head. And I would like to say that I don't hear voices, but I have this really strong sense of intuition. And I do sometimes hear random voices going, dude, have you done this? Anyway, it said, go upstairs and look at page 179. And it was so random. I thought, oh, what's 179? So I went upstairs. I looked at page 179 and it was supposed to begin chapter 13, but it was absolutely blank. And so when you self-publish, you have to check your proofs, you have to check your copy. And if there is an error, it is your error. Bearing in mind, I've got a room full of people downstairs. I've just invested my whole life savings and I've got a double life and I'm pretending. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And I couldn't get a hold of the printer because it was a Saturday. So I seat it on my guest and I just sit there and I do what I do best, cry. I just cry, sit there and cry. and couldn't get the hold of the printer on the Sunday. And on the Monday, he says, after a very long discussion, he said, I am extremely sorry, but I missed a printing plate. So in his world, that means nothing. But in my world, it's like, he says, I can do you double print run for no cost for 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm like, no, I have my press coming. Like, I have to get my books out on Thursday, and we're Monday at this stage. And as you know, with PR, once you move your slot, once you don't hit your slot, no one's bothered about your logistical problems. It's, did you get a book to me or not on the day that you said you would get a book to me? So I'm sitting there thinking, what should I do? So I say to him, can you print me 3,000 copies of page 179? And he said, yeah. And I said, courier them to me so I can get them tomorrow, at least the day after tomorrow, Wednesday at the latest, very latest. So he does this. And I literally sit sticking copies of page 179 in the middle of the night, because obviously by day I am supposed to be working. And I get all the copies off to journalists. And I'm sitting on about 2,500 copies. And I go randomly and ask, I call up the London Book Fair, which was happening a couple of weeks down the line. And they say, it's incredible because we have a stand and it's just come free, and there's cancellation cost has all been paid for. You can come. And it was incredible because it was a lot of money, which I didn't have to pay for. But by that time, I needed bodies. I needed a real PR person, and I needed a real editorial director of my publishing company, which was back then called Ninefish.
What do the editorial directors do?
Well, they're publishing, the face of the publisher, right? So I couldn't go as author, publisher, publicist and give out books. So I hadn't told a single soul up until that point, because I believed strongly in, when you're doing something very crazy, you start telling people and you dissipate the energy, because they start going, are you sure? And I'm a person, not so much now, but back then in my 20s, I was riddled with self-doubt. And so if someone would go, are you sure that sounds like a crazy idea? I'd be like, yeah, you're totally right. It was such a stupid idea, and leave it. So I purposely held the energy of that project and didn't tell a single soul until I needed bodies. And I called up 2 of my best friends and I said, I really need a PR director, and I think you'd be great. And you, Teresa, my publishing director, you'd be fantastic. And they came to the London Book Fair with me, and our only brief was to have fun and give out books. And what this did was incredible, because we're big publishers such as HarperCollins, Penguin, Random House, they were giving out leaflets. We were giving out books, and nobody could understand how we, a small publisher, had budgets to give out thousands of books. Anyway, we created quite a stir at the London Book Fair, and that week I was doing all my publicity. So I was going on big radio interviews, and at the end of one particular interview, the interviewer said to me, so Preethi, where could we get copies of Gypsy Masala? This is going to sound so terribly naive, but I had overlooked the whole distribution network so that there were no books in shops. And this was pre-Amazon. So before, like now you have Amazon.
You had to go into India.
You had to go into an individual bookshop to get the shop. And there's something called product placement, where you read an article, the product is already in the bookshops, and then you identify the article with the product, and then you buy the product, right? So I'm saying I was naive, but something that you need to know about the publishing world is that book shelf space is bought up. 3 for 2 shelf deals are bought up by big publishers. So
is in advance. It takes a year to release a book.
Yeah. So you might think as a consumer, oh my God, that book is doing really well. Well, actually, no, what they've done is they've gone and bought like massive stock shelf space, 3 for 2 deals. And if you're a very small player playing with big fish, you have no look in. So back to the interview question, she says, so Preethi, where can we get copies of Gypsy Masala? And I just took a deep breath and I said, in all good bookshops. And I literally visited 200 bookshops in the space of 10 days saying, I'm Preethi Nair, please stock my book. I know people don't do this, and a lot of them just looked at me like I was some crazy woman, and the others actually did end up stocking. So and then there's just one final thing that I want to touch on in this crazy publishing journey, was that I finally got interviews, and I was getting orders for product placement. But you won't remember this, or I don't think hardly any of your audience will remember this, but there was a petrol crisis And it happened in 4 days of my publicity. So the books were stuck in the warehouse and they couldn't be transported by the lorries because there were no lorries available because there was no petrol in the country. And it so happened to be in the 4 days of my publicity.
Oh,
What that means is the publicity passed me by. There was no books in the bookshops. And I just thought someone up there is telling me it is not my destiny to be an author. Because I kid you not, Geeta, I did absolutely everything I could, bar drive those lorries,
yeah.
right, to get to that stage.
So we're going to go for a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to hear the next step. Okay, we're back. And then?
So there was no petrol anywhere in the country. I didn't get the books into the bookshops. And as I said, someone clearly was telling me, don't be a writer, it's not your destiny. So I was in the process of putting away everything, all the Prue stuff, the Nine Fish, the publishing stuff, and going to look for a proper job. I worked as a management consultant.
Can I ask a question here? Hang on. Why didn't you set up a publishing company for self-publishing authors? Since you already knew how to do it.
It didn't even occur to me, and not something that I wanted to do after having done self-publishing.
Because it's so much easier to publishing, but promotion, because you had everything in place to promote books.
But I didn't want to be a promoter. I wanted to be a writer. That was my dream from like day one. And so I put away all the stuff, but I came across a card, and the card was from a lady called Tricia Stewart. And Tricia Stewart is responsible for the WI calendar. You've got sunflowers in the background, but they produced and launched a calendar with just covering themselves with sunflowers, and they were women in their 50s, and they did this for leukemia research and ended up raising millions and millions of pounds for leukemia research. Anyway, I'd met her at the London Book Fair, when we were giving out books, and she said, if you need any help or advice, you make sure you call me. So I called her, and it was probably 6 months later, and she was just wonderful. She said, what you need to do is to come up to Yorkshire. And I don't know. She said, why would I need to come up to Yorkshire? But she said, never make a decision from a point of weakness, make it from a point of strength.
Yeah.
So think about your next step. Don't just jump into it. And, we're going to Yorkshire we're going to America to promote the calendar. So why don't you have our cottages for about six weeks? And I thought, oh my God, this is just a random stranger offering you help. And I just think those are the most beautiful times in my life, when people that I don't know just reach out and just say, listen, what can I do to help? And so I took it. I said, yes, I'm going to say yes to it. And she said, why don't you drive up to Bedfordshire to see my agent, Diana? So I'm going to do that as well. So I drove up to Bedfordshire, and Diana said to me, I've heard all about you. I've heard all your story. I have 2 pieces of advice for you. The first one is you must let go. You must let go of that Prue story. You must let go of what did happen, what didn't happen, because unless you close that chapter and let go, you're not able to move on to the next part of your life. And the second part is, if you decide to write, and I mean write, you don't write for an audience, you write truthfully, you write honestly, you write from the heart, and you write not to be published. And you write because you have something that you so want to express that you can express it and think, well, at least I've done that. And that's the spirit that I want you to go and write your second manuscript with. So I went up to Yorkshire, and I had nothing to do apart from walk and write. And I wrote my second manuscript in 6 weeks, and I delivered it to her. And she said, well, just go back to work now, or get yourself a proper job. So I remember sitting down, putting together my CV very creatively. And she calls and she says, are you sitting down? I've approached various publishers, and they want to meet you because they want to know what bid to put in for a book deal that they'd like to offer you. So how it works in publishing is they meet you with their huge teams because they're trying to ascertain how marketable you are. So they meet you with their marketing teams, their sales teams, their editorial teams, their PR teams, like a massive group of people around the table. So I walked into HarperCollins with Diana, and I recognized every single person around that table, because I had either met them as Prue, great gate crashing parties, trying to learn how to do PR, or Robin, the sales director, was doing quality control on how to sell books. And he saw me selling these books. And he was the one, in fact, who said, there's a woman coming, just spare her the details and just stock her book. So I knew all those people. Anyway, HarperCollins offered me a 3-book deal, which I took. Thank you. And sorry, what did you say?
When was that?
That was in 2000.
Uh-huh.
So I think we're talking about 2002, 20 something years ago. And to end that part of the story, Prue was shortlisted as Publicist of the Year.
That's what I'm saying. I'm an entrepreneur. To me, that's a business, like literally a business.
Yeah, but I have no desire to do.
No, but you get a PA.
No, it's like,
how to do it. Like, here, go do this every frigging.
Yeah.
Full-on business.
Yeah, and so I was signed to HarperCollins and I was, for a long period of time, because I was obviously writing 3 books. But in all honesty, I didn't really enjoy the process, because you go from being a small independent publisher to making all your decisions, from cover design, editorial content, how it's marketed, how it's like, to going and relinquishing all that control. And sometimes, I can only speak for myself. I wasn't very happy with the decisions that were being made, and I found out how small my voice was, whereas before my voice was incredibly big, because it was just me who I had to answer to. And so I went off and I set up another company, which was teaching leaders how to tell great stories in corporates, and was running that and still run that. But something happened in that process. So I was running that successfully for about 7 years. And when it's time to move out of your comfort zone and you decide not, for whatever reason, not to move out, and on the outside, you can appear so successful, but on the inside, there's a slow death that happens. I don't know if you've ever...
Completely. But the universe has usually put their foot on my ass and kicked me very hard. And I found, so that...
And to kick yourself out. Well, like I was thinking, why didn't I move earlier? Like I was like...
Frightening.
Yeah, and like for me in my personal life, some things had happened in a very short space of time. So I lost my mum, I had a baby, I got married, and I moved house in a very short space of time, in a year. And I think that made me just cling on to safety and comfort. And like I said, to everyone else on the outside, it looks so good. Like my life will look, but on the inside, it was a mess.
Yeah.
So like a mess, I don't mean, I'm just mean emotionally. I was like, I just wanted a safe anchor,
Yeah, it's highly understandable. You want what you know.
Yes, but it was time to move, but it was time to do something big and creative, because there was something in me going, no, it's time to move. So there's a real conflict.
I know happily, I know what's going to come next. So I want to quickly go to our next break. And then I want you to tell us about that, because it's so funny when you tell stories like this. Like when I tell stories about my life, we tell them quite matter-of-factly because they're our lives, but people struggle to believe that we've done all these things. And so I want a little short break before you go to the next amazing thing that you've done. So we'll go on a break and we'll be back soon. So we're back. So tell us about this, what was I going to say? It is your second, it's kind of your third act.
Yeah, my third act, I think it would be. So I was really intrigued between the gap of who we really are and who we pretend to be, or the image that we curate. And sometimes we don't do that on purpose. It's not like we sit there curating an image, but I was just fascinated between that gap that's shown to the world and what's going on inside. And just very randomly, I met this woman at a party, and I had an amazing conversation with her. And she says, oh, why don't we go for coffee? And outwardly, she just appeared really successful, great husband, great kids, great life, great job, everything, right? And we met for a coffee, and this coffee lasted 5 hours, because she, for the first time, and I don't know, it was because I was a complete stranger, I don't know why, but told me the ins and outs of her life, but as it really, really was. And I thought, oh my God, so you've curated a life and the disparity between your life is so massively huge. And where do I connect in that story? Like, how do you know what I mean? Where's my connection in your story? So I just decided to interview loads of women, and there was no thought process apart from I just want to speak to loads of women to see if this is actually a thing that happens, or how much in our lives are we pretending?
Let me vouch for that as a women's coach.
How much are we actually pretending, or how much are we present in our life and living all our feelings and all our messy bits and like all of that? And that was all I did, right? So at the end of it, I thought, oh my God, I would like to write, and I didn't want to write a book at that stage. I want to write a one-woman show. And the idea was just to write a one-woman show. So I wrote a one-woman show, and the show was about a 59-year-old woman who pretends she's got the most perfect life. It's great husband, great kids, great grandchildren, lives in a gorgeous house. And on the eve of her 40th wedding anniversary, her first love comes to her and says, "Come away with me." And so you see this perfect life begin to unravel, and you see the truth of the situation and everything that she's been hiding. So I wrote it, and then I did try to send it to various producers in the West End, all of who told me there wasn't really a market for a 50-something-year-old woman.
And her story, no one cares.
No one cares. Anyway, this is like a red flag to me, because whenever someone says you can't do that,
yeah, no, I'm with you.
I'm like, oh my God, really? There's a massive market in this story. We're all connected universally, that there's a universal story here. So I booked a theatre in the West End, and I hired a director, and I rehearsed for 18 months to play all 22 parts of this show. Can I just add, I've never acted before, not even at school. And back then,
how much does it cost to hire a bloody theatre in the bloody West End?
Well, no, but do you know what? It was only for one night, and it's going to sound really ridiculous, because why would you go through all that effort to do that for one night, right? But it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about the cost, it was to overcome a part of myself that had got so scared and had got so small by just staying in a comfort zone. And that was what that was about. So I put on the show, and it was just for one night.
Came.
Sorry?
Came.
Everybody, like I just invited everyone along.
Sell tickets, you said.
To my concert. No, it wasn't a selling thing. It was just like, let's just do this and see what happens. And then what happened as a result is that we got invited back to the theatre. So we didn't pay for anything. We got invited back as part of a larger run. And the show kept going on. And
when you say we got invited back,
the director and myself.
Again.
Yeah, and again, so probably about 8 times. And then we got offered a bigger theatre, because this one was like a 90-seat theatre in Covent Garden. Then we got offered like a 380-seat theatre. And I thought, well, I don't have any desire, just like I have no desire to be a PR person, to be an actress. I want to be a writer. I want to write. That's my job. Like, that's my passion. And so I thought, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want to be an actress. I don't want to take this bigger. But what did end up happening was the producer of The Crown came to see the show, and then it got optioned for television. So then I decided to turn the show into a novel, because that's what it always wanted to be. But I didn't really enjoy the process of being... Yeah, I didn't enjoy the process of being with a publisher, writing for them. So I just thought I'll just write it and see where it goes. And contractually, I had a 4th book deal, in terms of I had to show my publisher for my 4th book. But I didn't realize at the time that I could turn that book deal down until I changed agents. But anyway, so I wrote this book called Unraveling, about the character in the play, but with far more depth and far more, because for me, there is a gap between tragedy and humor that it can tilt quite easily. It's like one minute you're crying your eyes out and the next minute you're laughing. And I wanted to put that sentiment and all the messy feelings into a book. So I wrote Unraveling, and it took me 5 years, because in the process, I would say I unraveled myself in the sense of just writing the book. And I got to the point and I finished it, and I was offered a 4th book deal with HarperCollins.
Right. And you thought, hell, I'd rather not.
Yeah, and I turned it down. Turned it down. And it felt liberating. And people will say, what? Why? But for me, it was about the integrity of the story, having a cover that I absolutely loved, having control over everything.
Did you find the agent before you turned, the new agent before you?
Yeah. No, so I had a new agent. And the rights had been sold for television, and it had been sold in Germany, and so it wasn't like I didn't have, it wasn't like I had no options. I had the option and I had a choice, and I made the choice to turn it down, and it was liberating. So Unraveling has just come out.
Just looking at it on Amazon, so you can buy it on Amazon at the moment, which is phenomenal because it came out in September.
It came out at the end of September, so last week. And yeah.
So what is it that brings you after? So this is a whole story of really well told, because you make it very personal, and people can often make these stories, as we were saying, not very personal, because you skip over the sometimes the pathos and the humor and the tragedy of doing things like this. What was the thing, when you look at all of that, what's the one thing you've learned about yourself?
I have learned, the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is the resilience and the ability to bounce back is still there. And I don't say that lightly, because I'm in my 50s now, and I think as you get older, it's harder. It's harder to come back from setbacks. I find personally, it's just because a whole range of other things happen to you in your life, but it's still there. And I have such tremendous gratitude for the fact that, I can still get up in the morning and I can still be excited and think, you know what, hasn't gone well today, but tomorrow's another day.
Yeah. Well, and also I would imagine relentless, because you've got to never, ever give up. Right? There is.
Yeah. Self-belief, believing in yourself. But also for me, it's been a process, because when I first started my publishing business, it was very inauthentic, right? And I have come to a place where it is totally authentic now. It's totally me. I found my voice. I know who I am. It's taken me years to do that.
Yeah. But I think it does. I think as women, you have to fight so hard against the strictures and the structures that we put ourselves in. I was thinking about that this morning, where I was saying that in my brain to myself, I was like, it's like going in a motorway and imagining that you can choose and you have free choice, because you're choosing the speed at which you drive the car, but you're still on that motorway. You can't come off it. And it's a very, in a quite a male-dominated society, we're meant to follow certain rules, and we imagine we have choice. And actually, we don't have choice till we choose to kind of burn the infrastructure down for ourselves and say, I'm going to do it differently.
Yeah.
And that's what I think about when I think of you. You just decided you were going to do it differently, and you've stayed true to that.
Yeah.
That's what you have been authentic about the whole way. But you were trying to, when you were younger, your authenticity came and trying to make it in a way, whereas now your authenticity is like, let me relay who I am.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a huge difference, because I think when I was younger, I was more driven by ego in a way that I'm not driven by ego now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like,
you define success differently when you've
exactly.
older and things. You do define success differently. And I found one of the biggest freedoms in my life was when I chose to define success myself.
Yeah.
Not somebody else's version of it.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you very much, Preethi, for joining me. Have a look at Unraveling, which is on Amazon and probably in all good bookshops.
It is actually in all good bookshops.
Which we can now say completely honestly. And enjoy the book. And thank you so much for the time that you've given me today, and story you've told us all.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. My name is Geeta Sidhu-Robb, and hopefully my introduction now makes sense, that you look at it and you see that there are things that you can do that make you a bigger version of yourself. And you don't always make yourself a bigger version of yourself for someone else. Sometimes it starts like that, but ultimately I think you're always making yourself a bigger version of yourself for yourself, because the bigger version of you is the best version of you. And then another bigger version comes, and that's the best version of you. And another bigger version comes, and that's the best. And don't be afraid to change with that. As I say, I've always hated change. And the universe has always kicked me straight into the next version of myself, whether I liked it or not, until my prayers became, God, please let me do it easily. I hope that for you listening to this, there's a place that you think, ooh, what can I make bigger or better? And what best version of me can show up if I did something that really excited me and I believed in? Because honestly, Preethi's just shown that the impossible just literally is around the corner and that you can make it happen. I look forward to having you join me again soon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our goal was to give you pause, make you think about your life, and inspire you to say, wow, what if I tried to do that? If they can do it, so can I. Did it work? Let us know by finding us on social media at Geeta Sidhu-Robb or at Nosh Detox. We upload new shows every 2 weeks here, and if you start to miss us, check us out on YouTube.